overcoming vague objections in selling. 6, the benefits are likely impossible to quantify. You have a lot of people who think that this stuff is complicated. And they think, oh my goodness, how in the world could you ever quantify a non-utility cost financial benefit, for example? I mean, I know how to calculate utility cost savings. Some people may say that and they don't even know that. They may be using an average cost per kilowatt hour when they should be using a much more refined utility tariff that takes into account time of use, time of day, and that sort of thing. Blocks of rates and volumes of usage and that sort of thing. But let's talk about garden variety savings where you're trying to say, you know what, I think if we did this thing, it would produce, in addition to the utility savings, some fundamental benefits financially for your operation. They'll say, well, what do you mean? Well, let me give you an example. There's almost always a way to quantify value. Even in complicated multi-tenant buildings with widely varying expense sharing clauses, lease terms, etc., running multiple scenarios through industry standard income property modeling software like Argus, which I've mentioned in a previous lesson, can determine the shares of costs and savings for the landlord and each tenant. That's a mouthful. It's a long sentence. The fact of the matter is, though, it's true. Okay? Now, in some cases, doing a simple exercise on a calculator, appealing to common sense, easily proves your point. I'm going to give you an example. Let's say that you have a project where the savings is $10,000 a year and it's a 2-year payback. And your prospect says, I need it to be a 1-year payback because my boss doesn't sign off on 2-year paybacks. It's got to be a 1-year payback. So now your challenge is clearly defined. You need to find another $10,000 in savings somewhere because you need to basically double the savings to cut the simple pay period in half. Okay? So how do you do that? Well, let's say you ask the question, what's the average salary of salary and benefits per worker you have here? And let's say how many workers are here in this factory? And what's the total payroll each year? So now you're trying to get to what percentage of that payroll is $10,000 equal to, right? What percentage of that payroll would we have to demonstrate in higher productivity in order to match the $10,000 we need to make up where we're currently short on getting that simple pay period down to 1 year, okay? So when you figure that percentage of the payroll, let's equate it to minutes of productivity per worker per day. How many more minutes of productivity per worker would that equal? And then finally, is it obvious that your upgrade will sufficiently improve the comfort and convenience to support that many minutes of additional productivity per worker per day? So let's put some numbers to this exercise, shall we? So remember that the assumed savings from the utility cost savings and maybe maintenance per year, it's $10,000 and it now gets you a 2-year payback, okay? You need $10,000 more in savings to make it a 1-year payback. So what's the average salary and benefits per worker? Let's say they tell you it's $50,000. How many workers are there? Let's say there are 50 people on the factory floor. What's the total payroll each year? That's pretty simple mathematics. $50,000 times 50 is $2.5 million a year. What percentage of that payroll is $10,000? It's 0.4%. Less than 1/2 of 1% productivity represents $10,000 in economic value in the human relations department. Okay? So how many more minutes of productivity per worker is that? Well, 0.4% times 8 hours a day times 50 minutes per hour, I'm allowing for coffee breaks and lunches, that's 1.6 minutes. So the conclusion is it obvious that your upgrade will sufficiently improve the comfort and convenience of this facility to support 1.6 minutes of additional productivity per worker per day? Now you could do this on a big buttons calculator. You're not talking about sines and cosines and logs. You're talking about simple mathematics, okay? How many people, when presented with this, would deny that putting in comfort cooling or better indoor air quality or better lighting quality wouldn't? How many people would deny that it would give you at least 1.6 minutes worth of additional productivity per worker per day? I'll tell you a story related to this. There was one of our ninjas, he's an energy solutions director at a large company in the Southeast, and he was called to a call center, a telemarketing call center with 500 workers by the regional manager there. And the regional manager said that, the indoor air quality has gotten to the point, thermal comfort has gotten to the point where they think it's a real drag on productivity, and they wanted to address it because it's affecting their numbers. So this gentleman, our ninja, went to the facility and decided that there would be 2 solutions. One is the Band-Aid solution for $650,000, and the other one is the wholesale replacement of all the air conditioning systems. That's about $1.6 million. The $1.6 million is obviously more expensive, but on the other hand, it would be a more durable solution, a more reliable solution, more guaranteed to solve the thermal comfort problems. So the regional manager was absolutely abhorred to hear that there might be a seven-figure solution. He said, listen, my boss is coming down from New Jersey, director of corporate real estate. Don't even mention that $1 million project because he's never going to give us seven figures for this. And in fact, I'm worried if you bring up the $1.6 million solution, he's going to just like totally lose patience and take this off the agenda, thinking it's too expensive a problem to even deal with at this point. Well, fortunately, our ninja stood his ground. He made the regional manager agree that they would be able to discuss both scenarios with this incoming corporate manager. And if the manager barked too loudly, they would just take the $1.6 million solution off the table. The goal being that the meeting wouldn't end, at least without having some solution, even the cheaper one, being authorized to proceed. So this ninja called me. He says, what do you think I should talk about? And I gave him something similar to the slide. I said, I bet call center people, you could probably get a very small number of minutes of increased productivity to equal a very big number and easily justify that $1.6 million improvement. He said, that's a great idea. So he did his homework. Sure enough, Mr. Big comes down from New Jersey to meet with the regional manager and this gentleman, our ninja. And sure enough, the conversation starts out. He said, listen, thanks for taking the time to meet with me. I know you've got a busy schedule, lots of agenda items to talk about. The point is, though, that I've studied your situation. There are two ways to solve the problem that the regional manager has brought to my attention. The one is the Band-Aid solution for $650,000. One is the real solution for $1.6 million, which is the one that I'm going to recommend. But before we get into the particulars, let me tell you, last night I did a little noodling on the back of an envelope based on a conversation I had with your HR director last month when I was on site looking at the building. And he told me how much you pay these people. And when you do a little math, by the way, parenthetically, it's very similar to this math here on this slide. It turns out that if we just got 1.2 minutes per day more productivity from each one of your 500 callers, the savings you would get in personnel productivity would be more than the energy savings of upgrading the entire system with $1.6 million in equipment. Pause. Silence is important. Mr. Big looks at him and says, that can't be right. Now, this efficiency sales professional was smart enough to say, what do you mean? How do you mean? He was basically just treading water because he didn't really know what the decision maker is objecting to. Was the number too small or too large? Sure enough, the decision maker has a second sentence out of his mouth saying it's got to be at least 5 minutes of comfort, right? If you make a place more comfortable, it's got to have at least 5 minutes more productivity per day, right? Which basically is a benefit that was 4 times what our ninja had suggested. And of course, our ninja, being an efficiency sales professional, he did what he should have done. He said, one word, one sentence. Well, there you go. That was it. The decision was made. $1.6 million. Hello. Now, there are 3 things that our ninja did right. Number one, when the regional manager said, don't ever mention the more expensive solution, our guy had the good sense to mention it, to force the issue, because as an old friend of mine who has spent 35 years in the energy efficiency business told me once, timid salespeople have the skinniest children. So being intimidated, not being able to even say the $1.6 million offer, that's kind of ridiculous. That wasn't going to fly. So he made sure that was on the table. The second thing he did right was when the Mr. Big figure disputed this 1.2 minutes per day, he didn't go into defense mode. He said, how do you mean? Because he really didn't know what the objection was. And then, of course, when Mr. Big said, it's got to be at least 5 minutes, right, which is 4 times the benefit that our ninja had claimed, our ninja had the good sense to say, you know what? There you go. You made the right decision. And there was nothing else beyond that was necessary. Anything else could have maybe unsold the deal. So now how much extra margin do you think this large mechanical service contractor made by selling a deal as $1.6 million as opposed to $650,000? And how much more commission do you think this gentleman made as a result of selling a project that was, several $100,000? $1.6 minus is $950,000 more in business. How much more commission did he make on that? Just by having the presence of mind to have concise communication, to do his prep work in advance, to have a multivariate approach to assigning value. It wasn't just that we're going to make the place cooler. It's that you're going to get this concomitant benefit of increased productivity, which is going to be making the energy savings pale by comparison. And that's what sells the deal. Okay, so keep that story in mind. I think it's very illustrative to a lot of the things that you encounter in your day-to-day selling activities. So in other cases, it pays to bring studies in that document impressive results in similar settings. Sometimes you can reduce those findings down to a small fraction of what was actually found in the studies, illustrating for your prospect how much cushion they have in case those studies don't exactly mirror the application under consideration. So if you bring to the table a series of 10 studies that said that the average efficiency improvement among workers that enjoyed a lighting efficiency improvement is 3.2%, you can say, you know, what if they're 2/3 wrong? What if you only get a 1% improvement in productivity? What is that worth? And you can quickly get to the numbers you need to get to, even if you heavily derate the studies, to allow for any doubting Thomas who's in the room who might think, well, you know, I see the studies, but what if our operation is exactly like the buildings that were studied in that survey? Okay, so feel free to derate with abandon, because it'll make it obvious that the deck is stacked in your customer's favor and that they're really going to get probably more benefits than you're asking them to accept as a belief.